I haven't had a librarian look at my book and say, well, wait a minute, it's $10.99 on Amazon and it's $12.99 for me. You know why that's not an issue? Because they're getting 55% off that $12.99. All of my book prices on Ingram are higher than they are other places in the retail market.
Eric Simmons is with us today. He was just a breath of fresh air and a great example of what you can do when you really put your mind to something. And he has done some amazing things with getting his self-published books into libraries. So let me talk a little bit about Eric. So Eric wrote and self-published his first book in 2017 with no prior background in book writing or publishing. Since then, he has published 3 other books, and in aggregate, his titles have appeared in Amazon bestseller lists 126 times since January of 2019. Several years ago, without any knowledge of the library market, he began introducing his titles to librarians. As of today, 158 libraries worldwide, including 7 of the nation's largest, have purchased 195 copies of his self-published books. For over 2 years, his article, How to Get Your Book into Libraries, ranked number 1 on Google out of over 2 billion results when searching for how to get your book into libraries. Eric and his wife, Cynthia, reside in Metro Atlanta and have 3 adult children. Eric, thank you so much for joining. Tell us a little bit about you and how you became an author and what got you started with just, focusing on libraries.
Well, just a little bit about me. I have lived a pretty interesting life, so much so over a decade. Friends, family, and coworkers would constantly tell me, you've got to write a book. And I procrastinated on doing so for about 10 years. And what people found fascinating was I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and spent my teenage years in Montgomery, Alabama. So I grew up in what I call the hotbed cities of the civil rights movement. And then after high school, I walked on and made a Division I college basketball program at only 5'7" and 147 pounds. And then during my corporate career, I had travels to Brussels. I'll do it in this order: to Paris, Brussels, and Hong Kong, where I closed sales of $500,000, $1 million, and $25 million. And so when people would hear bits and pieces of stories about my life, they said, Eric, you got to write a book. So I subsequently self-published my memoir. And when people found out that I self-published it, they said, how did you do that? So I wrote a book on how to self-publish. And then I started having success getting my self-published works in the libraries. And people started asking me, well, how did you do that? And I wrote a book on getting your book in the libraries. So one book evolved after another based on people's wanting help in the areas of self-publishing and libraries, and then wanting just to have me expand upon this somewhat unbelievable life that I've lived. Let me tell you what happened to me. I call this the roller coaster effect. I got so tired of not being able to figure out how I was going to do on Amazon. And part of that frustration stemmed from me having a sales background in corporate America. I was used to numbers. I was used to being able to forecast. People would say, how many books are you going to sell this month, Eric? And I could give them an idea. But in the self-publishing world, I was clueless. And I just said, wait a minute, I've got to find something that I can latch onto that gives me a little bit more predictability. And so I thought about book clubs. And when I started contacting book clubs, I found that I was too late, that the clubs had already decided on the books that they were going to read for the following year. So that didn't work. I looked at bookstores, and they had this thing called consignment arrangements, whereby, if it does well, we'll keep buying. If it doesn't, you got to buy your books back. And I'm like, no, I don't want to buy my own books back. So then the third area was libraries. And I was at that point, I'd early retired, and I didn't want to spend $400 for a Kirkus review. And I said, I think the quality of my book is good enough. I think I can get these in in my memoir, in this case with the first book, I can get it into a library. So I decided I was going to target and focus on libraries. And what I ended up doing, I developed a little call script. I was going to call libraries. I had the top 100 libraries in America. I Googled them and found them, and I was going to call them. So I called 3 libraries. First library, Eric, your book sounds great. Send me over some information. Second library, same thing. Third library, same thing. Shot my whole strategy out of the water. I was back to the drawing board. But everyone was saying, send them something. So I decided that I was going to use email as my primary means for reaching out to libraries. So subsequently, I developed an introductory letter, and it took me a while to tweak it and kind of figure out what needed to be in it to get enough attention from a librarian for her to consider purchasing the book, him or her. And what I ended up doing, and I didn't even realize it until someone told me, they said, Eric, you just built a sales sheet.
Yeah,
and that's actually what my email letter is. It's a sales sheet. And people say, well, okay, well, what's in it? Incredibly, I've made my metadata, which we're all familiar with if we've ever had to upload to Kindle. It's the book cover. It's the synopsis of the book. It's the ISBN. And in my letter, I'm also including where the book can be purchased. And if you want to get into libraries, you want to be distributing through Ingram.
Yes.
And I'd never heard of Ingram, entering the book business. I was, IBM, AT&T. Those are the kind of folks I knew as, big players. And in the book arena, I didn't know that Ingram was the world's largest book wholesaler. And so once I was able to get my books distributed through Ingram, as well as Amazon and others, I began emailing the libraries. And after my first mailing, believe it or not, the lady that just left, my first sale was Washington University in St. Louis, WashU. And once WashU said yes, I knew I was on to something because my philosophy was people talk. Librarians, that's a small community. That was my belief. It was just like when I was selling computers at IBM. If I went to April Cox Hospital and I got a system in there, my chances of going to Linda Hanson's hospital across town went up dramatically because they probably knew each other and they probably would feel good that, oh, if Eric's system is over there, it'll be good for me. And I found that's how librarians work. So once libraries find that I'm like in their area, my entry point becomes, at least in my experience, it's become much easier to get my books in the libraries.
Tell me about the pitch. So you've got this sheet that you're able to attach to an email or provide to them, but what was the pitch to them?
That's a great question. There are 2 things that I do regarding the pitch. The first, and not in this order, one of the things I try to do is create a subject line for my email to cause the librarian to want to open. And then the pitch is what I'm trying to do is align my book with what's called libraries' collection development policies. Every library has a collection development policy. And it's a fancy term, but all it means is it's the guidelines that the librarian uses to make a decision on books that they're going to acquire for the library. To give you a perfect example, and in your home area, April, in Cranton, if you Google the Cranton Public Library and you go onto that library's website, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see 2 things. You'll see a button next to the word catalog, and then you can enter a book and then try to search for the book there. And then the button next to it is website. If you click that button and then type in collection development policy, you will get that library's collection development policy. And in Cranton, that policy says, we look to, and I'm going to just briefly glance at something here, we look to meet the informational, educational, and recreational needs of our community. Something else that policy says, and Cranton, it says that materials and formats are not maintained past their relevance. So I researched 10 random libraries before I started emailing them to understand what their collection development policies were. The common theme that I found, the common word that I found was relevance.
Right.
So my pitch is I'm trying to show librarians how my book is relevant. That they present relevance to their patrons. Mm-hmm. As an example, my memoir, I can say it's relevant to the social sciences area.
Okay.
Self-publishing is relevant to the literature area. Mm-hmm. I'm even trying to point them into where it would fit in the library. If I had a children's book, I would say it would fit, it's relevant to your children's book area. Mm-hmm. So that's how I'm creating the hook. My whole hook is I'm trying to show that alignment, if you will, of my written works with the collection development policy.
Can you give an example of what a subject line that you might use with one of your libraries?
Well, I'll give you a good example. Ingram had a price increase last year. When I saw that price increase, I said, I'm going to do an email campaign to try to convince librarians that now is the time to buy my books, because with the price increase, I'm going to have to increase my price as well. And the reason why I have to increase my price, guys, is because my royalties are going to be, they're going to be impacted. So if I want to keep the same $3 royalty, I've got to bump my book up in conjunction with the incremental increase that Ingram's doing.
Right.
So my pitch in this case, the hook in the intro for the email would be Ingram announces price increase. And so, wait a minute, they're like, I didn't know that. Ingram didn't, because Ingram's probably not going to tell them. They tell us.
Right, okay.
The librarians may not know.
Okay.
So that would be one example. Last month, I did an email campaign. I only contacted several hundred libraries. But in that campaign, I posed a question. Are your customers asking about self-publishing? That was my subject line. Are they? Well, I'm sure some of them are.
Right.
So now, hopefully, they'll open that email, and then I'm pitching my self-publishing book.
How do you determine, or how has this kind of rolling process that you've done? You started with the most current libraries closest to you, or what was your strategy kind of to get to this level with them?
Great question. I went after the top 100 libraries in America, both public and academic. First, I Googled that, and I created an Excel spreadsheet that I call my library contacts database. That spreadsheet now has grown from 100 to I've got 6,000 librarian contacts in that database. And what I did was, when I would go onto the library's websites, my philosophy was to try to do a top-down, bottoms-up sales approach. So I was looking for the foremost decision makers within the library that I could find. Mm-hmm. If it was here in Atlanta, I had the CEO of the Fulton County Library System in my database. Mm-hmm. And if there was a CFO, I had that person. And then if I could find a branch librarian or two, as many as I could find, I would add those. Now, what I would find for even mid-sized libraries, most people will say, oh, we do centralized purchasing. Why are you sending me this, Eric? If it was at the branch level.
Right.
I would respond back and say, I view you as an informed recommender. So should your patrons at the branch level have an interest for a book like mine, I would hope that you would recommend it up to purchasing. And in libraries, along with how they acquire, their collection development policies are often maintained or managed by a collection development librarian. Mm-hmm. They may also be called collections librarian or acquisition librarian. But that's the person who ultimately has the guidance and the budget money that's bringing in the books. And I can't tell you how many head librarians of large systems have emailed me and said, Eric, I've passed this on to Sarah, who's over our collections department. Hopefully you'll hear back from her. The most challenging thing in dealing with libraries is they don't contact you usually. They won't contact you back unless they want to inform you that they've passed your information on to collections. So a lot of times you don't know when they purchase your book unless you go and kind of monitor your Ingram volumes and start seeing hits after you do your mailing. That's pretty much how I gauge it. If after I do a mailing and all of a sudden I get 5 books that pop up on Ingram, I'm 80% sure they're library sales, at least. Yeah.
So when you say Ingram, you mean Ingram Spark, right?
Ingram Spark, correct.
Yep. Okay.
The parent company is Ingram.
Yeah.
And librarians will refer to them as Ingram. But yeah, the tool analogous to Kindle is the Ingram Spark.
I have contacted every single library branch in Pinellas County. When I tell them I'm a local author, which I think should have some interest, which it does,
right?
Here's what I hear. Bring us a book and give it to us because we have a section for local authors and we keep the book a year. And then if it doesn't do well, we get rid of it. And it's like, okay, so now I'm supposed to give away 50 books, 100 books because nobody wants to buy it. I find that so frustrating. How do you deal with that?
I've had libraries ask me for books. And what I do is I say, I would love to give you my book for free. The problem that I have is I've had other libraries already purchase my book. If they find out that I have given a book away, it would create a major issue for me. That's how I do it.
Do you find that you get that by having it in the libraries, it increases your sales because then people go and buy it from Amazon or wherever?
That's a fantastic question. And the reason being, I did some research on that. And it turns out 70% or better of millennials buy a book that they check out from a library. 70%. Over 40% of baby boomers buy a book that they check out from a library. Those are stats that are out there. You can find that on the internet. It's a little difficult to find, but it's out there. But for me personally, here's what's happened. After I got my book, one book into a library, I've had 23 libraries purchase an additional book. I've had 10 purchase 2 additional books. I've had 2 purchase 3 additional books. And I've had 4 libraries that have purchased all 4 of my titles. So your statement, and to answer it is, I have seen new add-on sales once I get my book into a library. And statistically, you are likely anywhere from 40 to 70% chance of getting another book sold from that person that had checked out your book if they checked it out from a library, whether it be a baby boomer or a millennial.
Are you doing author visits and author signings at the libraries as well?
When I first started, I was getting into author visits and that was going well. Then the pandemic hit and libraries were shut down. And you know what I did? And this is something that I try to do when I'm corresponding with libraries. I try to be as creative as I can be. So instead of looking at the pandemic as a situation, well, okay, there go my library sales, they're closed. Guess what? Zoom. I started doing virtual sessions. I did a virtual reading of my memoir during the height of the pandemic. And I've done virtual sessions of my other books, getting your book in the libraries. I've done those for libraries. So I try to use technology to help me, particularly now with the pandemic, and to stay in front of librarians to answer the question. So now, no, I don't even try to set up physically going to the library anymore. I offer to do virtuals. So, I'll make that. So if I wanted to get into a library down in Florida in Pinellas County, I might contact the librarian down there and say, in my subject matter, would your patrons be interested in a how to self-publish webinar or Zoom call? Or would your children's book librarian be interested in such? Now, boom, they open it up and then, my offer to participate virtually would be in there.
Can you give us a sense as to how often you email them and Is it the same people? Because you said you email a subset of the libraries that you have in the list, right?
Yeah, interestingly, I've had some of my customers that buy the database and they like, oh, I'm going to email everybody in the database. And I go, I wouldn't recommend that. Because once you do, then you've got, when are you going to contact them again? Mm-hmm. So I break mine up and I might do 100 this month. Next month, I might be 300. The following month, I might do 200. I just break it up so that I can constantly stay in front of librarians. Currently, I would say I'm probably doing email campaigns about every 3 months. I used to be 1 month, but because I've been doing some other things, I'm now doing probably about every 3 months just to stay in front of them. And I just kind of rotate through and I don't give up. Interestingly, I had one librarian that purchased maybe one or two, I know one book, maybe two. And I kept looking at their website and I'm going, this is so familiar to me. It turned out I had over 2 years, I'd contacted that librarian about 8 or 9 times. The same person. And it took 8 or 9 times before she purchased.
Right.
And you say, wait a minute, why would you keep after her? Well, I may not have been catching their budget cycle. Their patrons may have not been asking for the type of book that I was presenting.
Right.
So there could be various reasons. So that's why I don't give up. Some of my customers, not many, but some have told me, oh, if I try 3 or 4 times and I don't get in, I don't use that library. You know, she kind of erases it or whatever out of the database. I don't do that. I keep plugging away.
With regard to children's books, do you have a sense as to whether children's authors would have the same process that you use? And do you have any reference points around children's books, Eric?
I don't have reference points around children's books. I've had several authors come to me and ask about my process, whether or not I think it would work. I think it will work because the only difference is I am kind of focusing on not only that key decision maker, but my books are more geared toward the adult services librarian. Yours would be geared towards the children's librarian. That's the only difference, because trying to reach the people that can influence the decision would be the same under either book scenario. That collection development librarian, hopefully the head librarian is going to provide or send down your contact or your email to that collections librarian, or at the branch level, they're going to filter it up to that person. So I think the concept would work. I really do.
Yeah.
It's just you're targeting. The only difference is you want to target that. I believe my book would be a great fit for your children's librarian or that section of the library. You want to specify it.
AJ talks about Baker and Taylor, who claims to be the largest supplier of books to libraries. Have you dealt with their book distributor?
I have. Baker and Taylor used to have a relationship with CreateSpace, who was pre-Kindle. What appears to have happened, something happened between Amazon's relationship with Baker and Taylor. And so I stopped seeing sales through Amazon that were Baker and Taylor related. I saw that go completely away. I've not seen much of that, nor do I see much of Baker and Taylor on the public library side. I haven't seen much of their activity lately. So whatever the reading is, I'm wondering if are they saying public libraries or are they saying academic? Because I'm not seeing them much in public. Ingram is king. Ingram does much more than Baker and Taylor. I fervently believe that, at least if you read their literature and information on the internet.
And what about Broad Art?
Broad Art, I believe they are more well known for like equipment, like shelves and things like that. Yeah, that go into libraries. But yeah, I've had some sales. I got a great working relationship with one of the Broad Art reps. And every new book I have, she always gets it and puts it in their catalog so that people can buy from Broad Art. And I do have some library sales through them.
So would you recommend also then using Broad Art? What is Broad Art? Can you give like a little overview about what they are?
I would say Broad Art is they're not Ingram, but they're a company that interfaces and offers products to libraries. Like, as I mentioned, I think shelving would be one thing, furniture. Count 'em.
Okay.
And then they also have books. So yes, broad art would be one. I don't have like 50 broad art sales, but I do have some. But yes, to cover all the bases, yeah, I would include broad art in my portfolio of distributors.
I was just asking if you send the same pitch every 1 to 3 months, or do you say, I send something, I'm touching back with you, or do you just send the exact same thing?
That's great. You guys are really good. I actually have different pitches now based on kind of what I'm doing. If it's an academic library and they're getting close to spring break, I've got a spring break pitch. I've got a new book pitch, a new book announcement pitch. I've got an intro pitch where I'm just introducing myself to the libraries for the first time. I've got now a self-publishing book pitch. So to your point, I'm not just sending the same thing over and over again because I rotate through my database just for that very reason. If I contact you 6 months later, I don't want you to read the same thing.
Do you think, Eric, that they would be open to, a publishing group or consortium of authors coming together to contact them on behalf of the group? Or do you think it's more of a single author, everybody does the same thing and they have to deal directly with one author?
Yeah, I was mulling over that. I know libraries look for consortiums for buying power. You'll see a lot of libraries will join consortiums for the cost benefit. I haven't seen a case where a consortium of books is coming in to libraries. I haven't seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's something that they'd be receptive to or not. The approach I've been using right now, and here's what's interesting. When I started really aggressively doing this about a little over two years ago, I would get emails back from librarians going, "Oh, thank you so much for sending us information." They were almost shocked that someone had contacted them.
Right.
So I don't think that the market is saturated enough yet to the extent that if you win it on your own, it would be a bad thing.
You talked about the price that the libraries are paying for the book. Do you tell them what you want them to pay you, or does Ingram tell them that? And you've already set up a discount base with Ingram. How is that dynamic working?
I follow Ingram's recommendation on pricing books for libraries. So I'll use $1 as an example. If my book is $1, Ingram recommends that I discount it at 55% for libraries. So I follow the 55% recommendation. I think Ingram had an option for like 30% or 35%.
Right.
I tried that and I was getting no library sales. I mean, none. I changed it over to 55 and then boom, sales just started rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So I use that model. And then what I do for my books, if I'm selling that book for $1 on Amazon, and then if I go to Ingram and I got 55% off, I'm like, I bump my price on Ingram up 55%.
Okay.
I bump my price up to make sure I'm getting the same royalty rate that I would outside of Ingram. And I haven't had a librarian look at my book and say, well, wait a minute, it's $10.99 on Amazon and it's $12.99 for me. You know why that's not an issue? Because they're getting 55% off that $12.99. All of my book prices on Ingram are higher than they are other places in the retail market. That's how I do it, because you won't be making anything. If it's 10 on Amazon, I might have to mark it up and sell it for 11 on Ingram so that I don't get hosed with my royalties. So
That's been my concern.
The way I do my calculation, because on Ingram Spark, once you type in your new price, it tells you what that royalty is going to be. And so all I do is I'm looking at, well, if I got $3 royalty on Amazon, I just keep changing that number until I see $3 royalty. If it's the same book, $3 royalty on Ingram, and I go, book, that's my price. I'm good.
With children's books, we've got full color illustrations. We've got a lot of heavy color printing.
Right.
And so it might be a little bit trickier, but I think it's well worth doing some trial and see whether or not we can come up with what we can do to make that 55% work. And one of the things that I've been able to do successfully is change the printing to standard printing instead of the premium printing. So the majority of time on a hardcover book, when you get it in the mail, it's not as saturated with color as the premium color is, but you can save yourself $2 or $3 on royalty and increase your royalty by that just by going to standard printing. So these are some things we as children books authors should test out to see if we can help make that 55% work.
Is there any chance, will libraries just not even give me the time of day if I try to sell them my offset printed books just as an individual, as opposed to going through a distributor like Ingram Spark?
I did not have much success trying to do it without Ingram. I could not figure it out. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm thinking of my memoir in particular. I was like, hey, this book is pretty good. Why am I getting all these no's? And then finally, and then believe it or not, it was here in Atlanta. One of the librarians said, Eric, you need to be in contact with our collections development librarian. I said, well, okay, who is that person? How do I contact? I contacted the collection development librarian, and she emailed me back and she says, yeah, everything looks great, but your book isn't available from where we purchased. That's when I knew. I was like, okay, I got to do the Ingram.
Might be worthwhile to also look at the Baker and Taylor route, because I know that they do purchase in bulk, and they, if they decide to distribute. And at one point I was looking into trying to get in and be a part of that distribution network. It was tricky. They wanted to see marketing plan. They wanted to see a history of high sales, because they won't take you in if the book isn't selling well on your own and if you don't have a really good marketing plan. So, but if you do have that in place, there is a place on their website where you can go to apply to have them take you in as a distributor there.
So Eric, when's your next book coming out? And what is it?
I'm actually redoing my memoir. I'm going to try to do it in the present tense. So it's going to be interesting. As 4-year-old Eric, I'm going to try to describe what I see in the world. And then as I evolve into a teenager and then into an adult, the tone would kind of change. But yeah, I'm working on that as we speak.
So an exciting surprise for those of you who are really intrigued with this. When I was speaking with Eric and I found Eric, he's got a great offering and he's put hundreds and probably thousands of hours of work into this database that he's created. And I'm happy to say that there is a way that you can get your hands on it as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit more, Eric, about how those that are watching this on replay or that are here today, how can they take advantage of this awesome resource that you have?
Sure. You can just Google Eric Simmons Library Marketing Service, and it will take you to my website, and you'll see that you can have the ability to purchase anywhere from 3,000 librarian contacts up to 6,000. My website, you can see, goes from 3,000 all the way up to 6,000 for $32.99 up to $66.99.
The first thing I think I told you when we met is you're not charging enough for this.
Yeah, right.
But I know everybody here will be grateful to be able to get in on all of this amazing work you've done. And I see you're offering things like, mail merge training. And so I assume that some of these other services are because people said to you, all right, now what do I do with the list?
You're right. That's exactly what happened. Or it was funny. I had a customer, we must have spent 45 minutes on the phone. She was like, okay, now what's in your intro letter? We were going back and forth and I was explaining what was in the intro letter. And she said, Eric, I just want you to do it for me. Just create the thing. And I was like, really? And I started laughing. I said, well, I don't even know what to charge for something like that. So then I finally started just doing an intro letter creation. But yeah, that's how most of those other offerings occurred. It was people asking me, hey, well, will you help me with this or that? And if I scroll down, I actually can do a contact strategy development session, those kinds of things. So
I think that, getting your help for those that are having trouble even thinking of what to write or how to approach it from a sales perspective, I think that's very valuable. And then start moving forward and, taking what we've learned today and moving forward with it. I think it's amazing to be able to have all of this done for you. I assume that some of these libraries have email addresses that when there's turnover, that it might, the same email address is used as people turn over. Is that what you've seen? Or have you seen a lot of people leaving and then you've got to refresh the database?
I've probably seen more of the latter. The librarian will leave if it's eric.simmons@simmonslibrary.com.
Yeah.
Then that email is like no longer valid. If Eric retires. So what I've done with the Microsoft version of the database, I've put in the links to the libraries to just save time to get back into the library to try to find who the new person is that replaced Eric. Okay. And then when I see April Cox, and then I have her email address, and it might say april.cox@simmonslibrary.com.
Right.
So that's kind of how I do it.
Kathleen is saying, what's the difference in Kindle or ePub? Is that one of the things that you have there?
The difference is Kindle, the analogy I use is there are two types of formats with ebooks, Kindle and ePub. So think about your cell phone. It's either a Motorola-like cell phone or it's an iPhone. iPhone is equivalent to Kindle and ePub is equivalent to the rest of the world. That's the best analogy I can give.
AJ is asking, what's the difference between library contact strategy development and library consulting?
The strategy development, it's more time. How much time? If you click view on that data, on that page, it'll show you more information and tells you the difference. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about more time. One, I think, is 2 hours, and the other is maybe 4 or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. But that's the difference.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for taking time to share this with us. I think it was an extremely valuable session and really appreciate it. And by the way, I will absolutely be purchasing the database for myself. And I'm sure that there's going to be a number of others that'll be looking to do the same as well. So thank you so much for all of that work that you did that went into giving us a little bit of a head start.
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity. You've been great. Good, hard questions, and I hope I answered most of them. Enjoy the rest of your evening.